Okay, next one. Here we go. This. Okay. This is mine. Okay. Huh?
What would you like us to
At the right time, not yet. We're going to ask questions first.
Oh, good. You like it.
Are we going?
I'm not on. Just wait a few minutes.
Am I on?
Yeah, not yet. Eliyahu, is it recording? Yeah.
Okay. I was asked by Rav Shlomo, the Menahel of the Al Sheikh Academy, to involve you all a little bit more. And I was not admonished, but I was taken aback slightly by one of us who said, "Look, I don't want to be put in the spot. I don't want to be made to feel like I'm in the limelight." I'll tell you a story. My late wife, Aleh Shalom, Chana, when she was in third grade, she was called by her math teacher to go to the board and to demonstrate how to solve what was a relatively simple problem. And she froze. And to the end of her life, she was never able to do math because she was traumatized. And I say that not just because of the mention that was made to me about the importance of not making someone feel embarrassed or put on the spot, but the importance of remaining connected to Hashem in everything that happens in our life, even the little messages and stories and incidents that people we happen to run into. There's no just happen to run into in Yiddishkeit. There's no chance. Everything is predestined and predetermined. The word for chance is the same gematria as Amalek, the bitter enemy of the Jewish people. If somebody has had a bad day, Ein Mazel Yisrael, we don't believe that it happened because the stars were aligned in a certain way which wasn't good. Because everything that happens for us, whether it's good or what doesn't feel good, is all from Hashem, is all literally good, despite what everybody says, oh, it's all good. No, it really is good. And it's a personal message to us from Hashem, helping us and guiding us and directing us to help us get to where we need to be, to get to the finish line. And when do we get to the finish line? When we've accomplished all that we have to accomplish in this world. That's when we reach the finish line. It may be 5 years, Leilenu. It may be 20 years. It may be 50 years. It may be 70 years. It may be 120 years. But I'm telling you, we're not limited. Despite that our physical bodies have limitations. Despite that Moshe Rabbeinu lived till 120. Because you want to know something, my dear friends? I'll tell you something amazing. When the Nazis, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, made their memory and anything going to be erased. When the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, it was September 9th. It was the day following Slichot. When is Slichot for Ashkenazi, my friends? This Motzei Shabbos. 1939. It's now 2023. How many years is that? 80 or so years? 85 years? Is it by coincidence it happened then? No. But when the Nazis invaded Poland and they came to the city of Lizensk in the south of Poland, and in Lizensk is buried the incredible, wonderful, loving Tzaddik Yesod Olam, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizensk. And the Nazis toppled over the matzeva, the monument, and they dug open where he was buried. And they opened up his grave. What do you think they found there? A bunch of dried bones? No. He had passed away, I think, in 1799. This is 1939. They found a body that was warm, that was peaceful, that was smiling. And it so spooked them, they ran away. And they never came back there. And the Jews quietly closed the casket, the Aron, buried him, and continued praying by the grave of this great tzaddik. Because the physical body of somebody who is connected to Hashem, like the Rebbe of Melech of Lizensk, does not disintegrate. So don't tell me after 120 years our body's going to disintegrate. It doesn't have to. We're not limited. We're limited by what we're going to learn about today. How our averas affect us. And what a tzaddik is. And what a Ba'al Teshuva is. So with that bit of an introduction, I want to ask you a question. Class participation. How many people here can say, honestly, I'm a Ba'al Teshuva? Nobody? Okay. After today's shir, you may not be so sure.
That's why you didn't say it. You wanted to say it.
You're smarter than me. And I'll ask you another question. Who is on a higher level? A Ba'al Teshuva? Remember, we're talking about a real Ba'al Teshuva. Maybe. I'm not sure. Who's on a higher level? A Tzaddik Gamur, the highest, most perfect tzaddik, like the Rebbe of Melech of Lizensk, or a Ba'al Teshuva?
Of course, it's tzaddik. So that it's a different arena.
Hold on to that thought, and we'll return to it. Okay. So let's now, with that hakdama, pass around the seventh midah of the midos of rachamim. Take one and pass it around. This midah will blow your mind. Because it'll, again, make you see things differently, but even more importantly, will give you a direction on how you can perfect yourself, how you can get close to Hashem, and yes, even how you can live not just to 40, 60, 80, 120 years. For how long did Avraham Avinu live? 175 years. That is the power of chesed. Chesed, vatranus, not wanting to be right. Chesed will lengthen your life and lengthen your years. Avram Avinu, who was the master of chesed, lived 175 years. And he probably would have lived longer had it not been for his anikel, for his grandson. Who was his grandson who went off the derech? A young man named Esav. And so Avram lived to 175 years, remarkably. And we're going to see the incredible power of what chesed can do. And we learned also in our very first shiur that the Tzanzer Rebbe, Reb Chaim Mitzan's shul here, named after him. The Tzanzer Rebbe says that anybody who learns Torah Devorah on a regular basis is guaranteed to not be smitten by the known illness, by cancer. It's a segula to prevent one from getting cancer or from having cancer. If you integrate the message, it has incredible, incredible medical benefits. And this is Jewish medicine, my friends. This is truly Jewish medicine. So let's take a look now, with that introduction, at the beginning of the seventh attribute of mercy. Says the Ramak HaKodesh, the Holy Ramak. Hashem does not act, and it's all translated to English. Boaz, did you get it? You have one? Okay, good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not relate in the manner that people of flesh and blood relate. That if your fellow man, if your friend would anger you, but then you reconcile with him. You want to get back together with him. You want to be friends with him again. But it's never quite the same. There was a song from the 50s that I'm going to quote that most of you may not have heard of. If you come from American culture, you may have heard of it. The best part of breaking up is when you're making up. Ever heard of that? But it really is not the same, because once you've been burned by someone, once someone has angered you, once someone has betrayed you, it's never the same. You don't have the same feeling. I'll never forget, when I went to Yeshiva University, I had a dear friend, dear friend. We were so close. He was 3 years younger than me. When you're 21, when you're 18 years old, 21 is like really old. I was 21, he was 18. And we decided to go down. It was Motzei Shabbos. I'm doing tshuva now for what I didn't do then. And there was a jazz concert with Thelonious Monk. You ever heard of Thelonious Monk? Anybody knows jazz? There was a jazz concert at the Village Gate with Thelonious Monk. But it was the middle of Sphira. Not allowed to hear public music. But I rationalized it because it was Malva Malka. I was tricking myself. I was listening to the seduction of the Yetzer Hara. And it was a great, great concert. But I lost a friend, because my friend, who was Chozer B'Tshuva, was devastated at my lack of values, at my lack of consistency, at my rationalization. So we made up later, my friend and I, but again, it was never the same again. And it hurts me, and it's happened many times throughout all of our lives, that somebody who we admire shows us their fallibility, shows us their flaws, shows us they're not so perfect. And it's devastating. When I have a patient, my wife and I had this disagreement. Often when we have a patient, we've experienced something that they've gone through. And I tell her that when somebody comes to us and is in pain, physically, emotionally, or mentally, or spiritually, they don't have room to hear about our pain, that we suffered the same thing as they suffered. We had a patient who came to live with us when we were in Los Angeles, a really lovely young man from a very, very dysfunctional home. And the dysfunctionality brought him to doing some terrible, terrible affairs, but he wanted to change, he wanted to get better. He joined one of the anonymous groups, AA, OA, and so on. He joined one of those groups, and he was from a Borough Park home. He was from a very pure home. And he was introduced to what he called the rooms, where you have all of these people who are former addicts. Lacht. He's laughing. You know what I'm talking about. And you have all these people who are sharing all of their addictions. And this sweet young man, I think he was 20 years old at the time, says, I've never felt so dirty in my life. He had a problem, but their problems are much worse. And the fact is, when you're helping someone do tshuva, when you're helping somebody get well, it's not right to share with them somebody else's pain. You need to focus on them. It is not right. I really totally disagree with this approach of letting it all come out. Because you're taking someone who may not have had a problem, and you're introducing all kinds of problems to them. You find also in yeshivas, there's a real problem. Some yeshivas they call paraduma yeshivas, because they're mataras atameim and matamias atahirim. They're like the paraduma. They take someone who is pure and they make them dirty because they're exposed to everything. And they take somebody who comes from maybe a home which is not so clean, and the person wants to become frum, and so it switches everything around, it mishes everything around, everything gets all mixed up. And so really we have to be very careful. One of the things that I learned this past Shabbos when I was spent Shol Shidduch by my Rebbe, Yoel Turgeman, Sultan Gizid, wonderful Makubal here in Tzvas, who gives Shol Shidduch in English and shares wonderful ideas. One of the ideas he mentioned is that kalayim, mixing things together, whether it's shatnez with clothes, or whether it's animals being plowed together, or it's fruit, it's destroying the order of things. Everything needs to, this is also the 15th principle of Jewish medicine. Everything has to be kaseder. Everything should be in the right order. If you mix things up, or you mix things around, or you mix them together, you're going to create a lot of confusion. So when you're dealing with a patient, if you happen to be a therapist or a doctor, or you're dealing with a friend, you're not doing them a service by mixing in your own experiences. Just give them support. Just give them strength. Okay. So let's get back to the Talmud Devorah.
Go back. Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
One thing that's been bothering me
Absolutely.
when I was reading the Asher is the whole idea of how God insisted on taking these 70 souls with Yaakov into the most defiled place in the world.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, why would God do that? Because the same thing is you have a huge risk of impuring the
Assimilation.
Right.
Polluting.
Right.
And that's one of the big debates that took place in the 70s and the early 80s between Satmar and Lubavitch. There were fiery conflicts when the Satmar Rebbe Zichron Livrocha and the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zichron Livrocha were alive. What is the correct approach? Do we spread ourselves out to bring people close, or do we protect ourselves? And they're both right. But we have to know where we're going. We have to know who we are. Unfortunately, there are many people that are involved in Kiruv who don't have a strong background, whose families are not strong and secure. And I know literally hundreds of people that come to Eretz Yisrael, and they've come to Yiddishkeit through Chabad, through Eshet Torah, through Or Samech, through any of the other Kiruv organizations and yeshivas, through Breslov. They're very excited. But what happens to their children? Some of their children, and these are tzaddikim, some of their children, they're tzaddikim, but they're really Ba'al Teshuva. Some of their children become criminals. They're in jail. You know why? Because of what Rosh Shlomo was asking. One should not go into a place which is polluted, which is dirty, which is impure, unless one is very strong first. When Yaakov Avinu came to Mitzrayim, he didn't just go. He specifically asked Hashem permission. And Hashem said, yes, go down to Mitzrayim. You know why? Because I'm going to be there with you. And I'm not only going to be there with you, but I'm going to bring out your children, and they're going to be with me, and you're going to come out too. And that's why those who say we mustn't pollute ourselves have a great point. But those who are strong, those who come from a stable home, a loving home, a secure home, a home. I'll tell you a story, a wonderful story. In Los Angeles, there was a great tzaddik whose name was Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner. He wrote many books. He was one of the leaders in outreach, and he unfortunately died of the machala very young. He tried to react to it by going to Mexico, and it didn't work, unfortunately. But one time, I was told this by a dear friend of ours. This friend was in his home, and his 6-year-old son pulled on his younger sister's pigtails, braids. And she started crying. And his mother looked at him and said to him, "Do you think Hashem is happy with what you just did?" Did the kid start talking back and making excuses? No, he broke into tears. He broke into tears because that message resonated with a 6-year-old mind and heart, because he became disconnected. So you have to be very, very careful when you're going into outreach, when you're going into a polluted place, a dirty place. For those of you who are Hasidim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zichron Livrocha, please forgive me, but I'm only quoting an incident from my Rosh Hashiva, Zichron Livrocha. No, so I think he's still alive. He must have been in his late 90s now. His name was Rav Meir Schlesinger at Shalavim. Rav Meir told me this, that when he came to New York, he had Yechidus with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And it upset him that there was a lot of ignorance, a lot of amaratzis, even sometimes practices that were suggested and were recommended and were told to people in terms of how to keep Shabbos, how to do a certain mitzvah, that were against halacha. They were against halacha. And my Rosh Hashiva asked, am I allowed to say this? Okay. I mean, the whole essence of what I try to do is transparency. We can't live in a dream world. We have to live with Hashem. And so we have to sometimes peel off the layers of vulnerability to get to the truth. So forgive me. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, and I'm not trying to lower the level of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. But I will tell you what my Rosh Hashiva told me. He asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe how he could allow such things like this to happen. Tell your Hasidim to be makpid on halacha. Not just on the things which are your campaigns. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe answered him, may his memory be blessed, if I would be more demanding of them, they wouldn't listen to me. Wow. And that's also one of the important lessons of chinuch. Don't look at that as a flaw in him, chas v'shalom. Look at it as a great attribute. As we're going to learn when we get to part 2 of Talmud Devorah. When we are integrating the message of chokhmah, a chokhmah means teaching, giving over. We have to make sure that the message we are being given over is able to be received and understood by the recipient. That's the Talmud Devorah. That's the Zohar Kodesh. That's the Rambam. And that's our Messiah. So it's not a flaw of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to say that. It's actually a clever revelation of the truth of Torah. That the essence of going out and being involved in Kiruv is a cost-to-benefit ratio. Yes, sometimes someone may not know exactly the halacha, but to be able to bring close to Hashem hundreds and thousands, hopefully tens of thousands of Jews is worth it. So let's get back now to the Talmud Devorah. And please forgive me if I've trampled on something which is uncomfortable for you, but I've actually given a great blessing to a great tzaddik who I met and saw. Okay, so we're said that if someone has a friend and the friend has wronged them, the friend has done a terrible thing to them, and then they reconcile, says the Talmud Devorah, when he reconciles with him, it's never the same. The reconciliation is there. You happen to see them, but it isn't this love that you had beforehand. This quote unquote, as a term that's used in America these days, this bromance, where people they really, really love each other. Not in a sexual way, but in the way that David HaMelech loved Yonasan. A true love without any conditions, without any strings attached. But unlike when somebody wrongs me, when I do something against Hashem, and then I do tshuva, I am on a higher level with the Kodesh Baruch Hu than this person before I wronged Hashem. Whoa. Tahainu, as it says in the Gemara that we're going to learn now, B'makam shabalei tshuva oimdim, ein tzadikim gemurim yicholim lamoid. In the place that Ba'alei Teshuva stand, completely righteous are not able to stand. Hold that thought. So now I'm going to read from the Rambam and tell you what a Ba'al Teshuva is, and then we're going to learn that Gemara. Okay. And so I didn't make a copy of this, but I want to read it to you. This is the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. It's in Yana Diyama because we're right in the middle of the Tshuva period. Says the Rambam. What is complete Tshuva? It's like this. Someone's done an avera before. They've done a sin. And now, they're passing by that place where they were before. And things smell the same. Or they look the same. And one's heart is just pounding with passion. And you want to do it. And you can do it. Perish. But he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Because I've done tshuva. And he says, I'm not going to do it, not because I'm afraid of getting punished, or afraid of getting seen. I'm going through the trash cans and somebody might see me. No. He's not afraid of anybody seeing him. And it's not because he's old and sick and tired and weak. Ketzer. So how we can explain that? Hareza Shabal Isha Ba'avera. Rambam's very explicit. A man has had relations with a woman, an illicit relationship with a woman. And then suddenly he's in the subway, or he's in the train in Yerushalayim, and there's nobody else in the train but her. And he still feels love and passion towards her. And he's not tired, and he's not old and weak. He's strong and healthy. And everything that happened, he should really want to do again. But he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Zohi Ba'al Teshuva Gamura. That is what is called a complete Ba'al Teshuva. A Ba'al Teshuva means somebody who has the opportunity to do a sin that they've done before and they don't do it. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. So we're talking about somebody who has all the strength to do the Avera did before. You have to be, the Rambam is going to tell you later, even if you are old and you do tshuva, or if you're weak or tired or sick and you do tshuva, that's fine. But nothing like this. And so that's who the Ba'al Teshuva is. Somebody asked me once, are you a Ba'al Teshuva? You don't think like somebody who's gone to yeshivas. I have gone to yeshivas. And so I told him, I'm working on it. We're all working on it. So now let's go to the Gemara. Take one, pass it down. First, we're going to learn that Gemara that we just quoted inside the Talmud Devorah. And it's based on the Gemara on Brachos Daf Lamed Daled. Says the Gemara, Rav Avo said, "B'makom shebalei tshuva oimdim," the place where the masters of tshuva stand. That's what a Ba'al Teshuva is. A Baal is an owner, somebody who owns tshuva, who the things that are tempting him don't own him, but tshuva owns him. Even the completely righteous are not able to stand. As it says in the Navi Yeshaya, we say this every Motzei Shabbos in Vayitin Lecha. Sholem, sholem l'rachak u'rekovov, Omer Hashem l'refasi. Peace, peace to the distant and to the near. Notice he mentions distant first, to tell us that the person who was distant before and comes close to Hashem is on a higher level. That's why a Ba'al Teshuva is higher than a tzaddik. Now let's go on to the other Gemara that I wanted to teach you. That was just parenthetic. This is a Gemara in Menachos. It's an amazing Gemara. And it's the basis of this Talmud Devorah that we're reading now. Rav Yehuda Bar Ilai taught. And by the way, you should, if you're online, there were handouts that we sent and they should be distributed. You should be able to see these Gemaras for yourself in Hebrew and in English. Fascinating Gemara. And then we're going to learn it inside the Talmud Devorah. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai taught, the two worlds that Hashem created, one he created with the letter Hey, and one he created with the letter Nu, Yud. Thank you, you're looking inside. But which world is associated with which letter? So let's look to the Chumash and see. The Torah tells us in Bereshis, chapter 2, verse 4. Eile toldos hashamayim va'aretz v'hivaram. These are the generations of heaven and earth when he created them. The implicit question is, what do you mean when he created them? Obviously, he created them. What's this additional word, v'hivaram, coming to add? But says the Gemara, says Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Behi should be read as Behei Varam, that with a hey, he created them. So from this we can derive that this world, Olam Hazeh, was created with a hey, and Olam Habu, the world to come, was created with a little yud. So ask me an obvious question. Read on. Anybody? Should I read? Okay. So why did Hashem create this world with a hey? Now look at the hey. Look at the text in the hey there. Or look at a hey in any Chumash or Siddur or any Hebrew book you have. Because it's shaped like a porch, which is wide open on the bottom. So you have this veranda. It has an opening in the bottom. And therefore, anyone who wants to use his free will to disengage from the path of good is free to do so. Well, wait a second. You might ask, how come that little leg on the left side of the hay is disconnected? Why is it hanging unattached? Because if one wants to do tshuva, he's helped to come in through that pitsy opening, that little tiny minuscule opening on the left-handed side. You see the hay has a little leg sticking out, and then there's the porch, there's the dalid, and there's a little tiny hole between them. So it so happens, as we're going to see in a minute, that there's a reason for that. What's the obvious question? The Gemara asks the obvious question. So wait a second. I don't want to say me. If someone does an avera, a terrible avera, and then they have tremendous regret, they're heartbroken, they start to cry, I want to come back to you, Hashem. It's not so simple. You remember after the golden calf, the people wanted to do tshuva. Hashem said, not so fast. Moshe had to daven for 40 days until he was given permission to actually go up on Har Sinai a second time. And so you can't just go back to where you were before. And there is a psychological and a spiritual reason behind it. The reason is because it won't work. For by attempting to do this, he will not receive Siyata Dishmaya. Loi Mistayis Milsa. Hashem will not help him. He's failed to do him again, he's failed to be unsuccessful again and again. To return successfully to the path of Hashem and to do tshuva, one must have divine assistance. For as Reish Lakish teaches us, Habal Atayr, one who seeks to purify himself is helped from above. You can't just say, I'm going to be about tshuva and that's it. Like you put we had this discussion on one of our groups in Sfas as to what can constitute a healer. If somebody takes a course in healing and they put up a placard on the door and they say, Avram Yosef, massage therapist. Does that work? That's being dishonest. That's not a healer. So too, if you want to do tshuva, you have to be transparent. You have to make it very clear to the public that you really are willing to do the work to get there. So one who seeks to purify themselves is help from above, whereas someone who seeks to pollute himself, all the paths are open to him. And this is why a diminutive, itsy-bitsy crown can be found in the left corner of the hay. Look at your hay. Look at a hay in any sefer you have. Look inside on the front page at the hay that's there. If you look on the corner of the hay on the left side, the top of the very, very top corner of the hay, you'll see a little tiny dot, which really is a crown. It's a miniature crown. And it's there because someone who returns to me in tshuva, who who works hard, I'm not only going to help him, but I will attach onto him a heavenly crown that will connect him. Somebody who does tshuva, Hashem reads our hearts. Hashem knows what we're thinking. And if somebody is genuinely wanting to connect to Hashem, Hashem will accept it. There was a story, there was a great Rebbe who was nifter around 1830, whose name was Rav Meir Premishlaner. Tremendous tzaddik. And it so happened in Premishlaner, the mikveh was on top of an icy hill. I was told this by my Rebbe many, many years ago, the Al Rebbe. I was told this, and for the message I'm going to tell you in a minute. And there was these two free thinkers, these two, as my Rebbe used to call them, trumpetnickers, two bums, who saw that the Rebbe of Meir Plemishlan was going up the direct path to the top of the hill where the mikveh was, firm steps, impossible, it was icy. And so they said, this must be some kind of trick. So they followed after him, took a few steps, whoa, they fell, caught themselves, a few more steps. They were halfway up, and they came plummeting down to the bottom. Broke bones, were a mess, black and blue all over. And so the Rebbe of Meir went to visit them, to be Mekayim the mitzvah, to fulfill the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, to visit the sick. And they asked him, Rebbe, we don't understand. We understand that what you did was not magic and was not a trick. But how come we couldn't do it? Said the Rebbe of Meir, if someone is connected above, just like we learned in the Gemara here, with that little crown that's in the corner of the hay, if someone is connected above, they'll be connected down below. And with that, I went to YU. I went to Shalavim. I went to Litvish yeshivas. And I met my Rebbe in 1982. And he gave me a gartel. He told me that story. And he said, if you're connected down below, you're connected above. That's why I started wearing a gartel. And I would suggest you do it also, because it'll help connect you. And wearing a belt is not enough, because it says by the mitzvah, by the brachas in the morning, it doesn't say, Oizer Yisrael begevura, Oizer Adam begevura. It says, Oizer Yisrael begevura. It has to be something which is specifically Jewish, which we're binding ourselves to. Because you're doing something Jewish when you wear a gartel. So that's the little dot which connects us to Hashem. So let's go back to the Talmud Devorah and finish the text then. Okay. Because the reason why a Ba'al Teshuva, someone who has mastered return, is on a higher level than a tzaddik, kinyan hay, because it's just like a hay. Why is a hay made and formed like a porch? Anybody who wants to escape from this world, it's wide open. Perush. Oilim shenibra b'hay. This world that was created with a hay has got a very, very big escape hatch down below. If I don't want to be Shomer Shabbos, isn't it interesting? What do we call people that are irreligious? Chofshim. They're free. Anybody who wants to be chofshi, free, b'vakasha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara olama pasuach l'tzad ra. Hashem opened up the bottom of the hay wide open. V'achet leharvacha. Wide open to sin. V'ein sar shein choymer v'yetzahara upegam k'minach sadra. And there's nowhere he won't be able to find all the pleasures of life. He won't be able to find Yetzirah and blemishes, just like the bottom of the porch, which is wide open. I want to show you another quick story. Has anybody here heard of the Twilight Zone? So there was a Twilight Zone. There was this guy who was this gambler, and he died. And he goes to the other world. And he sees that he's in a gambler's paradise. Diamonds and everything the heart would desire. And he has a tour guide. And the tour guide says, welcome to the world. Wow, this is great. What's that over there? Come on, let's go see. He goes into there. It's a gambling casino. Here, take some money. Puts it in. Thousands and thousands of dollars he keeps winning. And then he tries another game and another game. He wins at everything. And after a while, he's a little bit bored. And he says to him, this world is great, but maybe I would prefer the other world. And his host tells him, this is the other world. This is Gehenna. All the pleasures of the world are Gehenna without boundaries. There's no fences. Because once he's broken through this delicate wall, downward, there's a small, thin, string-like entrance to the bottom. Anybody who wants to leave the world of truth, there's lots of openings for him. And this path is so, as we learned about how sin makes a person dirty, makes a person far away from Hashem, and all these things are so overwhelming and just so all-encompassing, they're like being caught in quicksand. Just think of the story of the Chacham and the Tam from Rabbi Nachman, the story of the sophisticate and the simpleton. The sophisticate didn't even believe when he was in quicksand, when he was in it. He didn't believe it. But that's the Gehenna. But it's open, this little tiny opening on top. That if he will return to Hashem, he'll accept him. And as we asked in the Gemara, Yikshe, Lahadri, okay, great, I want to do tshuva, like we said in the Gemara. I want to go the fast way. It doesn't work. Lamistaya Milsa. It's not going to work. Hashem is going to help you because the forces of evil and filth are just too powerful to someone who's already been caught in them. Because the Averas that he've done have just pulled him down. And it doesn't work. The Getter at Tzaddikim. Tzaddikim don't need that. Perhaps a tzaddik may not have done an Avera, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us all with Yetzer Haras, including a tzaddik. And the tzaddik certainly has had thoughts, but he overcomes them in his thoughts. That's why it says, this is very interesting, read it very carefully, you'll see something very interesting. You might say, well, why can a tzaddik come back? Because a tzaddik hasn't sinned.